Please welcome to the stage Robin Ince and Armando Iannucci. Are you happy either chair? Brilliant. I don't think it's going to get better than that.
No,
we should leave.
No. This is how Nuremberg started.
Some of them happy with that idea. We'll get straight in talking about, because last night, when I first saw you last night, the first reaction to the world is, I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with the fact that, as we were talking about, we seem to have a government where many of those involved are beyond parody.
Yes.
And really, ever since, someone like Priti Patel, what can you do?
What can you do?
Yeah, and
I know what you can do with Priti Patel, but what can you do with Priti Patel? Yeah. I know, it is weird. It's sort of, shows like Yes Minister and the thick of it and so on are all sort of predicated on the fact that, there are a set of rules by which the country is governed, and what we're doing is shining a little light onto how those rules might be bent slightly and twisted, and how words might be missing. But if there are no rules, if Donald Trump says, as he did, I could shoot a guy in the face in the middle of Fifth Avenue and still get elected, or if under Boris Johnson, there was a minister who got up and said, we are breaking international law, but only in a very limited and specific way. Then there are no rules, And if you have someone who doesn't believe in the truth, I'm not saying that's Boris Johnson. This is a hypothetical figure. If you have someone who doesn't believe in the truth or law, then where are you? I don't think we could have invented in something like that. I don't think we could have invented a character who walks into a garden, sees lots of wine and cheese and people going, yay, and doesn't know it's a party, and stays there for about 25 minutes, and even at the end of that, still hasn't worked out it's a party. That's very first draft, goes in the bin, we'll rewrite that. We'll make it 1 minute or something, and then he leaves. So that's right. So, and I think also the other thing I've noticed is that a lot of these people are themselves entertainers. I mean, Donald Trump is an entertainer. He's obsessed with ratings. That's all he's interested in: the poll numbers, the viewing figures, the number of people that were at his inauguration, and similarly, Boris Johnson is a kind of an entertainer. So they're the comedians. Boris Johnson is a self-basting satirist. That's what he is.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking,
Discuss.
Jonathan Coe wrote a piece quite a few years ago, I think in the Literary Review, so it might have been London Review of Books, and he said about the fact that Boris Johnson, the moment he worked out the character that would sell, and this was about 15 years ago he wrote this article, he said, there was a moment on Have I Got News for You, where up to that point, and it's incredible the short memory that we have as human beings, which is, I think most people now remember Boris Johnson as always at least projecting this kind of, first draft P.G. Wodehouse character that's then binned. And then, but that has now become him. There was a moment where he did the tousled hair thing, looked a bit sheepish, got a big laugh, and Jonathan Coe says you can actually see in his eyes going, "Oh, this is the character I can do.
I can rule the world with this." Yes, and then when he does get to rule the world or the country, he talks about Mr. Blobby, or he goes to the United Nations to talk about climate change, and he talks about Kermit the Frog. I mean, so the two, the cartoon figure is both a front and also the substance. That's the depressing thing. So there is someone there who knows what he's doing, but at the same time isn't aware that what he's doing is truly awful. And that's the dilemma we have to tussle with.
But it's I mean, in the 21st century, it seems to have moved very, very quickly, because with George W. Bush, there was a period of time where I think, unfortunately, a lot of people wasted the opportunity to satirise him by just talking about, sentences and poor use of language as opposed to actually. But already now, George W. Bush, who was seen as such, the monstrous nature of him, now, by 2019, people are going, he seems all right. He's quite an adventure figure. Because now we've got this Donald Trump, and that speed of monstrosity.
He invaded Iraq for no reason, but, that aside, he was fine, yes, there is that. And that's what's happened, I think. We've actually crossed a line where there's no going back either, because, my fear is not, Donald Trump again, but a smarter Donald Trump, someone smarter, younger, seeing what Donald Trump did, thinking, well, it worked, and he was an idiot. I'll do that, but I'm a bit smarter. That's the thing that I worry about. And similarly, Boris Johnson is sort of taking the Trump playbook and trying to make it a little bit less, obvious. But, he's bringing in voter ID cards because, of course, there's massive corruption in every election we have in this country. We all know that. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. It's there, The elections have all been stolen, so we have to have these ID cards now. So he's stealing rules from the Republican playbook here. But once that starts, once you start, and it's happening in all sides as well. Political parties used to be broad churches, broad coalitions, where people, united in a party, but knew they had slightly different opinions. But that's not been the case now. So when Boris became party leader, he not just didn't appoint anyone who didn't believe in Brexit, he expelled them from the party. And similarly, Corbyn comes along and gets rid of the Blairites. Starmer comes along, gets rid of all the Corbynistas. So we've lost that sense of a political party being a kind of broad church where compromise is possible. And it's now all about the leader's worldview. And you have to, if you don't believe in that in total, you can't be part of that power group, really. And that is the problem, because we've lost, I think, this ability to converse and to debate and to argue civilly but forcefully with someone with whom we disagree, and see if we can come to some kind of possibility of a compromise.
Would something like the thick of it...
Welcome to the Slapstick Festival, everyone. We're looking at comedy through the...
do you think the thick of it would be... would you be able to make something like that now? Is it, when you get to this difficulty of the fact that some people seem to start from being beyond parody, do you feel that if you were going to start now in 2022 to do a comedy based
I don't know. It's a sort of strange... people ask me that, and I just think it's not a question that's... I don't feel it's relevant as a question, because you think if it was a response to whatever was happening at the time. I made the thick of it because I was passionately angry about the invasion of Iraq, Blair in conjunction with Bush, and I wanted to know why a prime minister could do such a thing, given that all the experts, even his backbenchers, everyone was saying, what are you doing? This is terrible. How can a prime minister have that amount of power? And so it then led me to look at how does it work? How does power work in Westminster and Whitehall? The office of prime minister, the way power is centralised there, the way cabinet ministers have become a little less influential. They're now, Attlee and Churchill, they were first among equals, really. They put in place people in health and education, so on, who just got on with the job because they were good at it. Now it's all about all those decisions have to come back to the Prime Minister. So I thought I'd wanted to come up with a show that demonstrated how power worked in Whitehall, really, and the influence of, they're called enforcers, these nameless figures that fan out from number 10 to all the different departments and tell them what they're saying on Newsnight tonight and so on. And they sound like the Dementors or something, but there's these enormous... And Malcolm Tucker was meant to be the personification of that, the enforcers and so on. But that was about that particular moment. I think now, I'm not even sure a kind of documentary style, behind the scenes, handheld camera, dramatization of what's going on is necessarily the best way of showing what's going on. Interestingly, because, Johnson is the comedian or the entertainer. The most interesting comedic take on him is just people reporting back his words. Just taking his speeches and laying them out. Or you get someone who's slightly more journalistic, like John Oliver, who's got like a whole team of researchers and resources to look at archives and to look back at the speeches and so on, and just lay out an argument, really. It's almost like the comedians have become the journalists because the politicians have become the comedians, really.
I think you noticed that on Question Time. There was a point on Question Time where the most erudite people would be, if you see Mark Steele on Question Time, I think when, who was it? Who was, one of the journalists talks about the fact that the illegal drugs trade has something like, I think, an advertising budget of £30 trillion. There was one of those things that I think it was Melanie Phillips just suddenly made up this enormous figure. And just to look at Mark Steele's face that could no longer close for about 3 minutes, it just gaping open at just... And
I remember the first time I went on Question Time, and I was very nervous, and the moment I realised I'm with a completely different audience was, I wanted to tell something that was a joke, all right? I mean, it was related to the topic, but it was a joke, so it needed a setup and then the punchline. But when I said the setup, people just went... I thought, all right, no, I get it. Okay, I see. It's different here.
As we're talking about satire, I suppose the idea of what the purpose is, because there have been, as has been talked about in the past, Germany in the 1930s was a vibrant cabaret and satire scene, and
they did so much to stop the rise of Adolf Hitler.
Alternative comedy began in 1979, and by 1997 the Conservatives were out. So that Do you ever, when you have been working on things which have that satirical element, do you think of its purpose in that way, in terms of people's attitude to power?
I've never thought that. I've never thought that, satire is there to change how people vote or to bring down the... I think you'd go crazy if you thought that. It's a subtler thing. It's there, hopefully, something like the thick of it, I thought, all right, I had this anger about Iraq, but I didn't want to do a comedy about Iraq. Well, I did in the end, within the look, but with the thick of it, I wanted to do something that wasn't particularly necessarily for one type of audience politically. I thought it would be interesting to show, the public from my research and so on, a comedic take on actually how government works these days. So in the first episode of The Thick of It, where the minister's on the way to make an announcement and has summoned the Britain's press to a school in Derbyshire to make an announcement, and is then told on the phone, you can't, the Treasury's nixed it. And he has like 45 minutes in the back of a car to come up with a policy that costs nothing and that will be popular. And we said something, and we were filming away, and then I said to the cast, because we were literally driving on the way to the location, I said, and with the cameras on, I said, do you want to just improvise? And they came up with 3 policies that I put in the programme. Within 5 years, they had all become law. Which was, everyone had to have their own permanent plastic bag, pet ASBOs, and Chris Addison came up with a national spare room database, which became the bedroom tax. And when The Thick of It went out, the number of, public figures who said this is terrible, cynical, government isn't like that, there's lots of people who do good. The number of people who've done that have been matched by the number of cabinet ministers and former cabinet ministers or ministers who've come up quietly and said, I've been in the back of that car. It's because that's what happens. And it's not, I wanted to show, it's not people being, they're not evil. They really are not evil, apart from 1 or 2. But, they don't get up in the morning saying, who shall I kill today or who shall I destroy? It's to do with, it's the whole, it's neither cock-up or conspiracy, it's a little bit of both. And also, the way it's set up is we put so much focus and attention on these people and expect them to deliver 24 hours a day perfectly. And they're absolutely knackered and distracted and have, other agendas going on to do with their own kind of positioning and so on. So that, you think something that must have taken months to research and months to put together, you find out, no, they came up with it in the back of a car.
Is that a problem as well? I'm thinking about that once you become, you're noted, you're award-winning, all of these things, which means that you possibly end up on the list to go to the parties where people that you might be turning into characters, suddenly they're in the room. I mean, because it seems to me there is a problem in the UK where there is a tremendous chumminess, for instance, in the media with politicians. We were talking about this beforehand. If you watch a lot of kind of UK politicians, if they ever go onto a chat show in the Republic of Ireland, it's a totally different thing, and it's a much more kind of and they know how. Whereas here, there always seems to be a sense that once the cameras are off, everyone's just having a nice chat, and it doesn't really matter, and it's all a game, it's all fine.
Yeah. I think it's Rory Bremner who says that he doesn't want to get to know the people he's impressed, because you'll discover they're human beings, and they are human beings. And it's not about that. It's not about going, oh, they're actually quite nice. Oh, well, I won't say those things. It's about how they behave and what they think and what they do. You know, that's the issue. I mean, I remember once going to a party. I did a thing for the Times, so I was invited along to, was that a Christmas thing? Basically, Rupert Murdoch was there, and therefore I went in, and it was the most frightening thing I've ever encountered, because I went into this room where everyone you knew off the telly was there, including the cabinet, who were over there, and the shadow cabinet, who were over there. And I lasted 10 minutes. The bar was over there, and I thought, I'll tell you what, I don't know anyone, what do I do? I'll just slowly walk that way to the bar, as if I'm going to the bar, in the hope I might meet someone that I can chat to. Got to the bar, nothing. So I just turned round and did the same again to get to the front. Nobody, I didn't connect with anyone. I thought, I'll do one more bar run. I went to the bar, and as I was going to the bar, I could see a security guy next to Rupert Murdoch going, and so I just turned around and just walked out the door and ran as fast as I could, because it was the scariest way. But I think there is that. I think, and we're finding out now with Partygate, there were journalists there at these parties. The Prime Ministers appoint journalists to be their kind of communications directors. They appoint journalists to become senior civil servants. The whole nexus is increasingly, confused and incestuous. So there's a lot of that going on. Yeah.
But that seems to me to be one of the major problems, which is, as you said, people are, there are people who BBC News reporters and all around us who are waiting to get the job that's going to take them to Downing Street.
Yes.
And to have those relationships.
Yes. And the whole system works on, if you give if you reveal this or do that, then you won't get the exclusive that we want to reveal to you. Talking of encountering politicians, I did do one thing, which was, it was before Tony Blair was elected Prime Minister, so it was the last Labour conference while they were in opposition. And we got a call saying that Tony would like to be interviewed by Alan Partridge for a youth rally. And every word in that sentence is terrible, isn't it? So could he do like a 10-minute kind of funny interview with Alan? And we thought, well, I mean, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. We were at the time we were sympathetic, and let's try it. So we wrote this, rather good but quite, bang bang bang, rat-tat-tat, comedy routine between Alan and Tony Blair. Steve Coogan and I. And Steve and I, we went up to Blackpool, and Peter Mandelson came out and saw us. No, that wasn't a... Okay, I found your level. Okay.
I liked how specific it was to one
Yeah.
corner. Someone who knows another story as well.
Because in fact, he did come out in around about 1997, so that would fit. Yeah. Peter Mandelson, and he saw Steve Coogan. He turned to his assistant and said, "Where's Alan Partridge?" and I could see the assistant kind of going, "There's a character played by Steve Coogan." Oh, okay. Anyway, this way, and we sat down, and this was quite close to the event. This was like, half an hour to go. No sign of Tony. And then Tony arrived, a very tall man, with Alistair behind him. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a disaster because it's quite complicated. The back and forth and there's puns, there's gags, it's quite well written, if I do it. I mean, it was really bloody good material. So, and he arrived and, thanks, and, this is it, I think this is going to be a disaster. And he was just going, okay, joke about the euro, Alistair? Okay, joke about Prescott, Alistair?
Yeah.
Lovely, right. And I thought, my God, this is going to be, Went out, did it absolutely word perfectly. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, just nailed it from start to finish. But the interesting thing was, when he wasn't on, like when Steve was doing his Alan Partridge, so doing his bit, Tony Blair would kind of go like this. And then switch back into doing the affable kind of, I'm just a guy, kind of like that, and then. And I just thought, this is like, I don't know where I am anymore. This is just, he's some kind of strange robot that clearly Alistair has programmed. I don't know. It just was a real eye-opener to me, really.
When do you think that started, that idea of the division between the person that they are and the person that they portray? Because, I mean, I suppose some people might say that the famous Nixon-Kennedy interview where, where Kennedy won just because he looked clean-shaven and he looked smart and there was a kind of...
Well, I suppose Thatcher did it, didn't she, really? Because when she was elected leader of the Conservative Party, she had quite a high-pitched, kind of quite a shrill voice, and she wore big, fancy hats. And she or someone closer decided she had to change her voice, get rid of the hats and change that image. And she did do some voice, rather like Hitler did. I'm not saying, but there is footage of Hitler doing his kind of, and all that,
I loved that last one because that was very much a slapstick. That had a... Hitler's going to drop the do. It's just not working.
Why, yada. If it hadn't been for you pesky Ruskies, I'd have gotten away with it. Hitler, ladies and gentlemen. So we've done Hitler.
But I was thinking when you mentioned Thatcher about because. Again, seeing the time of trying to put people into the popular media, because I remember her being on TV's Saturday Superstore, being one of the people putting votes in for what was the best band of the day, and her having to have an opinion, I think, on Curiosity Killed the Cat.
Okay.
But it was obviously someone had said, we need to get you really into the youth market. You need to sit next to Mike Reid.
Yes. My God. Yeah, I know, and she also appointed an advertising agency, didn't she? She appointed Saatchi & Saatchi to run her kind of the visuals of her campaign and the notorious Labour isn't working poster and so on. So I think that, and she appointed Bernard Ingham, who was an ex-journalist, as her press, who stayed with her for I think 10 years as her press. So it was that. I think that was the kind of the most obvious start of that packaging of political imagery and the leader imagery, and to the extent that now, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said last week, we have a presidential system, an all but name, in that we might vote for the party, but we're sort of voting for the leader of the party, because the leader of the party, and this is the thing with the British Constitution, not that it exists in writing but in practice, a prime minister with an enormous majority can do whatever the hell they like. Can do absolutely, they can abolish the Supreme Court if they want, because they brought in the Supreme Court. They can abolish it. They can get rid of this Bill of Rights, or they can appoint this person to run Ofcom, or it's extensive power. Lord Hailsham called it an elective dictatorship, in that it's more power resides in the office of the Prime Minister than it does with the US president, because the US president can be checked by Congress, can't get legislation through if they don't have Congress inside, can be checked by the Supreme Court. We don't have any checks on prime ministers here. You know, we have notional discussions and debates and committees and so on, but fundamentally, if they want to go ahead with it, they can. Hence, things like Iraq happens and so on.
Well, we better have the first. We've got a bunch of clips.
You've got a funny clip.
Funny clip, yes.
Clip, yes.
So,
is it Hitler going?
And I think the first one we've got is going to be David Frost and the Frost Report, which I suppose that was the week that was. Is that the beginning of? Because we were talking about this beforehand.
Yeah.
I mean, the BBC rules that used to exist and TV rules were, for instance, if you were going to do an impersonation of someone, you had to have written a letter to them and have got permission.
Yes.
So, you know, it was quite hard to be satirical. And then
yes.
Some of the things that Frost...
Writing a letter in itself it's been an adventure, really, isn't it? You know, to take you dear Mr. Macmillan, in 7 days' time, I intend to make a joke about you. Which of the following punchlines would be acceptable?
Yeah. Hello, Keith.
Yeah.
Let's have a look then at the Frost Report.
He first collaborated with the other Ronnie on the Frost Report in 1966.
I look down on him because I am upper class.
I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place.
Right, so now...
oh, hello. Oh. That's the last 50 years put in 2 sentences there.
Well, it's an interesting... because I was thinking about it with David Frost, because there was someone who both became an establishment figure,
yes.
but at the same time remained, you know, an interrogator
yes,
on Sunday
very
mornings.
Good interviewer,
and that's an interesting,
yeah.
again, an interesting, we were talking before, but, you know, these incredible summer parties he would have where,
yeah.
you know, people say it would basically be Barbara Windsor, have you met Beatrice Gala? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yes. You'd like to think that you know, that class system that they're portraying there has gone now, and it's all to do with, you know, it's the culture wars we're having now. But fundamentally, I think we still, for some reason, think that certain people who speak confidently must know what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And if they don't speak confidently, they don't know what they're doing. And yet the ones who speak most confidently are the ones who end up causing more damage than any of the others. And it's a very British thing. It struck me when I went to America to do Veep how, I wouldn't say classless it is, but how you're not actually judged by your accent or your dialect, really, you know. I think that's a different system where, you know, you're judged by how successful you've been, you know. But if you started off in the Bronx or in, you know, where it was California or, you know, a flyover state, the patronizing they call them, it doesn't matter. You know, you're not disregarded if you have a, you know, a broad New York accent or something like that. It's not about that at all. It's about how good are you. Whereas here, I think we still, fall into the habit of thinking, well, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he? You know, and you realise, oh no, you know, that was the most depressing. The more I did research on things like Thick of It and In the Loop in America for, you know, going into the Pentagon and the State Department, the more I realised, no, people are sort of just making it up as they go along. And a lot of the world is run by 24-year-olds who have done politics as a degree and then gone straight into become political researchers, you know. So I met, when we were researching In the Loop, which is a sort of fictional version of the British and American governments invading a foreign country. So it was about 6 or 7 years after Iraq, but it was a kind of attempt to portray comedically what happened. And we did try and get a lot of it in that we found out. We found out that, you know, there was a 24-year-old that was sent over by the Americans to help draw up the Iraqi constitution because he'd got a degree in constitutional studies from Georgetown University. You know, 24, telling you how to run a country. Who, you know, he doesn't know how to run a car. Or, do you know what I mean? And there he goes. And we found that more. We found that, what's his name, Donald Rumsfeld, who was the defense secretary, when he was recruiting people to help to take over once they invaded, he'd ask them if they spoke Arabic. And if they said yes, he said, well, you can't go because the fact that you've learned Arabic shows you have pro-Arab tendencies. So he sort of whittled out the kind of people who could... Now, that sounds fairly comedic, doesn't it? But then when the Americans did take over, there was a whole spate of Marines guarding certain border posts and telling drivers to stay put. And occasionally some cars would charge towards them and they'd shoot them and it'd just be a family who'd been killed. It's because it took them 6 months before they were told that in Iraq, that means come forward. And that was a consequence of Donald Rumsfeld not recruiting enough people who knew the region.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to skip some clips, and just so I'll give a warning, because this seems to be a worthwhile time to talk about Death of Stalin, because what I thought was so fascinating about that film, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is I would find myself laughing and then have to remind myself that it was real. The thing you would just talk about there, which is there is a level of absurdity where the division between it being laugh out loud and something where you almost want to burst into tears can be very, very fine. And I found that quite, I mean, when you were researching that, and it's basically pretty much all true, isn't it?
Yes. There was the Sunday Times, when the film came out, Sunday Times commissioned Simon Sebag Montefiore, who'd done these magnificent books on Stalin's life. They commissioned him to write an article on how inaccurate the film was. And he went to see it and he came back and he said, it's all true. It's all true, I'm afraid. So to their credit, he then wrote an article on how true it was, because it was all, the more we dug around. I mean, obviously we invented things and lines and dialogue and stuff like that, and there's a comedic kind of rhythm to it. But whenever we found a true story, I don't know what the clip is that we're going to see.
No, neither do I. It's a lovely surprise.
Why don't we play the clip, and then I can...
Literally, this is great. They've put together a thing. This is our running order. And it just has name of show, and then just says, you will then discuss clip together. So that's the full script. Oh, that turns out that's the cue as well. I just not realised.
Oh, this is calamity. Calamity. Oh no. Oh, he's on the floor. He's on the fucking floor.
Okay, be careful, careful.
Oh, what to do? Oh, what to do? My heart, it feels sick. Like it's going into battle. Oh. Which doctor have you called?
Oh, well,
The subject's currently under discussion.
yes, as acting general secretary, I think that, the committee should decide.
The committee? But our actual general secretary is lying in a puddle of indignity. I mean, I think he's saying, get me a doctor now.
No, I don't agree. I think we should wait until we're quartered.
Quartered? The room is only 75% conscious.
Are you wearing pajamas?
Yes, so?
Why?
Because I act, Lavrenti, decisively and with great speed.
I said you'd be tested, and right now you're being tested by a shouting man wearing pajamas. Have you got a nappy under those too? Too late for him.
Out of my way, you fannies!
Shit.
Where's the big fella?
Are we late? Sorry. You can't go. Not like this.
Careful.
Whoa. Wait, it's wet.
So, now, the thing is, that's all true, in that both Khrushchev did an account of what happened when Stalin died, and Svetlana, his daughter, Stalin's daughter, did as well, and both accounts tally, which was Stalin had a seizure through the night, made a loud bang as he fell on the floor. He'd so terrified his guards all the time that none of them wanted to be the first one to knock on the door in case they got shot. And there was a story of a guard who looked after Stalin, and his wife, it was the guard's birthday, and his wife gave him some slippers. And he said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I don't want you waking up, there's lots of wooden floors in the dacha. I don't want you waking Stalin up. So you wear some slippers." And Stalin heard that this guy had been given slippers and thought, he's wearing slippers so he can creep up on me at night, isn't he? And had him shot. So there's stories like that. And Beria, who played by Simon Russell Beale there, was the first to arrive and immediately stopped them from getting doctors in immediately on the basis that Stalin had lots of doctors arrested because he thought there was a plot by lots of Jewish doctors to kill him. So all the preeminent doctors in Moscow had been rounded up and were on a kind of suspect list. So again, Beria didn't want to take the first decision, so he wanted the committee to assemble, and then they had to decide whether or not to get a doctor in case they got the wrong doctor. And so Stalin died. So events like that we found, and we tried to construct as much as possible out of true events, really, because I thought that was the only way we could tackle that kind of subject, really.
But that's what I found fascinating about the film as well, is the beats of the film. Again, the beat of farce and the beat of tragedy that goes through. And I would imagine that during the edit as well, that moment of thinking, did you ever have kind of almost ethical quandaries of thinking, do you know what, we've made there something which could have a big laugh, which is actually something so grotesque?
Well, it was, I remember the edit. The edit took longer to do than making the film, because the edit was all about trying to get that balancing act between tragedy and comedy, and not having the comedy kind of deflate the tragedy, and neither have the tragedy overwhelm the comedy. And I sort of took the decision that the events going on inside the Kremlin should be funny, but whenever we showed what happened outside the Kremlin, more or less, which was rounding ups and stalags, that was played for real. We weren't looking for gags there. And I went back, we discussed this last night, I went back and watched Charlie Chaplin's Great Dictator, an amazing satire on Hitler done in 1941. So right, as in the middle of it, really. And it has some amazing comedic moments of brilliance. Hitler dancing with his globe, the train not stopping at the right spot in the station for Mussolini to get out, or wherever he's called in the film. Fantastic, funny Chaplin-esque stuff. And also scenes from the Jewish ghetto, where there are no laughs, and he's not looking for laughs, And I thought that was, and I thought, and my rule was really, if it's not funny, it should be interesting. The non-funny scenes are not there for padding. They're there for effect, because there's a horror there as well, really. And I think horror movies and comedies have a slightly similar rhythm to them, in how they're put together, because horror is all about just very unexpectedly. So it's about the timing, and just as you've forgotten that it happens again, so it's about pacing and that's comedy's about that as well.
This is like interviewing Roald Dahl. It's just but I think that's a very interesting. If you look at short horror stories, and you look at like comedians often write very good short stories, because a short story is building up to a punchline, whether that punchline is of horror or of humour. Yeah. And I find that kind of we better get, because we're nearly at the end. And
are we?
Yeah.
What?
Wow, no, don't worry. We'll fit all the clips in.
How did that happen?
I think the next one's from Are You Being Served? And
are we taking?
Sorry, this is the wrong list. This is Richard Herring's
questions
list.
From? Questions from the
now,
audience.
this is a fascinating one, because we'll talk about this. We're going to look at Yes Minister, and it's that fact that here is this beautiful piece of satire which was absolutely adored within Westminster. And we'll talk about that. So let's have a look at this clip from Yes Minister.
Then we follow the 4 steps.
They still stand up, don't they? And look at where we are now. You know, obviously, you know, there was a party. No, well, there was never a party. You know, well, there might have been a party, but I was advised there wasn't a party. I mean, I was at a thing, but I was advised that what I was at wasn't a party.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I'd like to answer that question, but we're now waiting for Sue Gray's report. You know. I'd love to show you Sue Gray's report, but unfortunately, the Metropolitan Police have stepped in, and unfortunately, Sue Gray's report has now been redacted. I'm very happy to publish Sue Gray's redacted report, and as you can see from the redactions, there's really nothing in it. So, I think the matter. I think we can draw a line under it now, really. Cressida Dick is now retiring.
But that's in it. Well, there's lots of different levels of looking at from that. One is that waiting game, which I think we certainly saw with Dominic Cummings and Barnard Castle, which was so many different alibis came out, and it just kept playing out, and then they got more and more ridiculous, and then apparently the newspapers got bored, and so it actually was through a kind of element of surrealism. It was talked out.
I'm reading in the press today, you know, Johnson may be out of the woods now. There's certainly an air of, you know, and it's not. It's just another week has gone by. That's all that's happened, really. It's just another week, and you know, and everyone's got a life to get on with. So we're getting on with our lives, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't whitewash the fact that all these things happened, or you know, how he how he attempts to explain how they didn't happen, or if they did happen. He wasn't involved, or if he was involved, he wasn't involved knowingly, or if it was knowingly, it was because he was misadvised, and if he was misadvised, the person who misadvised him wasn't appointed by him, it was someone else, or if it was appointed by him, then he didn't knowingly appoint someone who would knowingly misadvise him, you know, and so it's, you know, and you can, you know, I can do this for hours if you want, you know, but it's not going to get us anywhere. It's just
That's a lovely mixture of the civil service and music hall, I think, which is a beautiful thing to watch.
But also how supine are the mainstream media have been very good at breaking all these stories. Interestingly, it's like the traditional. It was the Telegraph publishing this photo and the ITV News publishing that and so on. So hats off to the so-called mainstream media for doing it. But you can't then go and that's it. You know, you've got to follow it up. And I was told, and in fact I spoke to the person involved who confirmed this is true. There was an inquiry into how Tony Blair had put together the 45-minute dossier. And was it sloppily put together? Had he misled Parliament, whatever? And Lord Butler, Robin Butler, who had been Chief Secretary to the Cabinet under Thatcher Major and Blair, was appointed to launch the inquiry. And it was a proper inquiry, judicial inquiry. And he concluded that there was lots of sloppy evidence gathering, sofa government, just Blair and a few advisors, not, you know, lack of human. And he concluded, being a civil servant, he concluded, he set out where there were flaws, and he was going to do a press conference, and he had decided that if asked by a journalist, should the Prime Minister resign, he was going to say, that's for the Prime Minister to decide, which is Whitehall code for yes. But I can't say that. So he did the press conference. No journalist asked him that question. And as he was walking off, he thought, hang on a minute. No one's asked the question. Oh, it's too late now. So no journalist had asked the question. He thought if no journalist was going to ask the question, he would have planted the question. But no journalist was going to ask the question. No one thought in the media to ask, should the Prime Minister resign? And, you know, who knows what might have happened. And that kind of, I think, draws attention to a kind of, you know, the way the system, you talked about it being a game. I think a lot of people, you said a waiting game with Dominic Cummings. It is a kind of game to a lot of people in that it has a set of its own rules and codes, and if you just play it well, you know, people will approve or people won't approve within the circle in which you play it. But it's you know, to us outside, it looks baffling, really.
Well, I'm interested, going to Yes Minister, which is how much that would be a reflection of the civil service now. We're seeing this interesting thing, which is again, kind of social media being used to try and change the story. I noticed the other day a lot of people who had names with many numbers in them on Twitter were all saying, oh, well, I think the real question is who's leaked the fact there was a party. So it's no longer about breaking the rules, it's that maybe someone's broken I think it must have been on GB News or whatever, has someone broken the Official Secrets Act. And it does seem that the relationship with the civil service and, from the outside
But
anyway,
then
and
civil
government...
service, I think, perhaps under Blair, I think it started where Prime Ministers, new governments coming in, have done clear-outs of various civil servants, mandarins, and have put their own appointees in as civil servants. So parts of the civil service are already becoming politicised, as in, you know, there are certain people now in place. Even civil servants are there meant to be neutral and permanent, really, there to service whichever government is in power on the basis of their experience. But I think it's become more the norm now for new prime ministers to bring in fresh appointees, really, to try and cast the civil service in their image, really. So that's where that kind of boundary is starting to become a bit blurred.
And what about, if I've got a civil servant lives down the street from me, and he's been his whole career, he's in his 60s now, and he said he has found it quite remarkable in the last 5 years, because, for instance, after Brexit, he said you would go in every single day and say, do you want us to get these things sorted? And they'd go, oh, I don't think so, no. And it's just this inaction.
Yes.
Again, another waiting game thing. I mean, I think that Barnier in his book, where he talks about when the EU came in to do the first negotiations, and they have all these stacks of cases filled with documents, and David Davies probably hasn't even got his jacket on. Just, what are we going to do then? You not brought anything with you? You're right, isn't it?
Well, that's what also worries me, that that it is just a game. It's all for show. It's Liz Truss being photographed in a tank to make her look tough. But you could put a child in a tank and they would look tough because they've got a tank. It's not the person, it's the tank. It really is that simple.
See, I'm worried now, because we've seen before about your prescience with various things involving the bedroom tax, carrier bags, etc.
Put a child in a tank.
When our toddler leader takes over, Nietzsche's idea again, was it? Yeah, it was, yeah. But
so are we taking questions from? Are we doing questions or?
No.
No.
I got a message back and they said, no, we've checked, and no. I'll tell you what, let's...
Is this a COVID thing?
Let's just do all the clips really fast and then just do a one-liner after each one of them. It'll be fine. Well, this one is, because this is such a great film, and I would say in terms of satirical films, one of the greatest is Dr. Strangelove. So I'll tell you what, we'll have a look at the clip. I'm not sure, again, no idea which clip it is of Dr. Strangelove. It might actually just be a Clockwork Orange that they show. We'll find out what it is. But here is Dr. Strangelove.
What did you say? I said Premier Kissoff is a degenerate atheist. Mr. President, I formally request that this ignorant... Well, I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I think they're trying the number.
You filthy bully, you filthy... You so you guy, you've not tasted karate before, eh? You war mustering bully.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, that, to me, there's an interesting thing about this, which is that film was basically almost made twice in the same year, which is you have a film called Failsafe.
That's right.
Which is pretty much that, but it's
Cinema
serious,
Night, I think,
and no one remembers that, and it's not seen as whereas Dr. Strangelove, which is extremely dark comedy.
Which is why I always think, you're not belittling a subject by making it the subject of a comedy. It's just that comedy allows you to approach a subject in a completely surprising and unexpected way. It allows you to kind of peer behind it a little bit, The thing I remember from my time researching both In the Loop and Veep set in Washington was going around these Washington institutions, because they all look from the outside very imperious. I mean, Washington's based a lot on, ancient Rome, a lot of the pillars and, the Congress, and it all looks like everyone knows exactly what they're doing. And again, when you go in, they're not. A journalist told me, if you want to go round the State Department, because I thought our film In the Loop was based in the State Department, it'd be lovely to see inside, see what it's like. And they said, just say you're from the BBC and you've come for the 12:30. So myself and my assistant, who was about 12, went up to the front reception at the State Department and said, hello, from the BBC, we're here for the 12:30. And they said, oh yeah, just come through here. So, and suddenly, with no one with us, we were in the State Department, just wandering around. And I thought, well, you know, my art department back home will probably want some pictures. So I took out my phone and, you know, I thought, this is both fun and possibly international espionage. Here we go, you know? And then a big guy came around the corner and went, excuse me? And I said, we're here for the 12:30. He went, oh, it's just over there. and so we went to Condoleezza Rice's press briefing, you know, which was boring as hell. But the thing we noticed was, in America, they don't like spending money on government buildings because big government is terrible. Get our government off our backs and all that. So everything is just the cheapest possible. So all the chairs in the State Department don't match the tables because they were just bought as a job. So the tables are there, but the chairs have arms that are too high, so you can't. So everyone's like that. And then we went round the West Wing because when Veep, you know, we wanted to set second season of Veep, we wanted to build the West Wing, and we thought it'd be good to go around. So we got into contact with Obama's body man, who basically his assistant, was called Reggie Love, who's this extremely tall ex-college basketball superstar. And you wander around the West Wing with your surname on. So he wanders around with Love written on. Just high five. But he took us around the West Wing. The West Wing is just this warren of tiny little corridors and so on. I mean, it's a poxy, just a rabbit warren. But people like to say they work in the West Wing. You know, you can have far more spacious rooms across the road on the Eisenhower building or whatever. But we actually saw 4-star generals sitting on tiny little stools in a corridor with a briefcase and a laptop, and you know, because they wanted to tell their wife they work in the West Wing. You know, whereas in fact they could have had an enormous, you know, there's that, and also Reggie Love himself was saying, you know, he kept referencing the TV show, The West Wing. So he'd say, this is the Eisenhower room, this is the Roosevelt room. This would be where CJ and Josh would work. And I said, but you're him, this is the West Wing. Why don't you say this is where Hillary Clinton would meet with President Barack Obama to discuss, you know, and it's like, it was a strange kind of, they found it interesting that there was a TV show about them. That was much more exciting than what they were doing. You know?
Has there been a moment when you've been making something and you have gone behind the scenes into a reality that you've not seen before? I wonder if any of them have been a big influence on going, hang on a minute, there's a scene that we can entirely change now that we've observed this closely.
Well, it was that. I mean, the reason I go around these places is because I want to try and capture the look, you know, and I don't want to do the Hollywood version. You know, when we were doing The Death of Stalin, I didn't want to do what the Hollywood version of Moscow was. I wanted to get the genuine feel for it. And so we went round Moscow, and I wanted to see what the Lubyanka was like, which was the prison where Beria, it was the home of the KGB. So they're now called something else. And I said, is there any way we could see the Lubyanka? And they said, no, well, you can't visit it, but there is a viewing platform on top of a kind of Disney store in the main shopping area there that will give you a view onto it. So we went to the Disney store. We noticed these people, these guys with like dark suits, kind of just, you know, about, you know, a dozen or so yards away, just fine. But that was fine. You know, we look at them and they look at us. And I went up onto the roof, the viewing platform, views across the city. The Lubyanka is over there, but there was a sort of partition was put up there. But there were railings that went out like that, so there was this triangle like that. So I thought, well, I'll look through the triangle. And I looked through it, and then I turned around, and standing right there was a guy in the dark suit who just went, no. Okay. But I like to go and see the places to get, you know, one of the nicest things when we did the film, we showed it, you know, around the world, and Russian audiences, and well, that's a whole other story because it got banned in Russia. Very Soviet thing happened the night before it was released in the cinemas. A letter was published, signed by 100 cultural figures in Russia, saying this film is of no artistic merit whatsoever. But it kind of always pleased me if I met someone from Russia and then they'd say, where in Moscow did you film the film? Because I'd say in London. But we managed to find buildings that gave us the exact look. Because having gone round the Kremlin and so on, there's something about it, I don't know, and it's not necessarily something that audiences might pick up on, but I just like to know that I'm constructing the world as accurately as possible. And then we can start having the fun and playing with it and you know, pulling it about. But I want it to feel convincing, really. Because what I don't want to be showing you is a cartoon that's clearly exaggerated and made up. I want you to think I'm watching something that perhaps I'm not allowed to see, but for some reason I'm being allowed to see it. Because then I think you just get more drawn into that kind of world.
And it's nice as well to think that anyone going on a tour every now and again says, and I'm the guy who Steve Buscemi is, or whatever it would be. You know, there's kind of nice...
Yes.
Let's do the next clip, because we'll go out to the audience in a minute. We've got two more clips to have a look at, and the next is the date. Is it 30 years since the day today? It's not far off, is it, I think?
No, I tell you what, it's because our eldest was born the day after the day today. So it's 28 years.
Right, let's have a look at a clip from the day today.
Yeah.
A week of foul-tempered debate in Europe ended this afternoon as finance ministers agreed new quota rates for trade with the United States. In Brussels is our economics correspondent, Peter O'Hanrahan. Peter, what is the new rate?
It's 30%, Chris. Agreement was a long time coming, but in the end, the decision was unanimous.
What was the Germans' reaction? Because they've been holding out for 40%, haven't they?
That's right. When I spoke to Finance Minister Reinhardt earlier today, he said he didn't like the deal, but he had to go along with it.
Really? You spoke to him yourself? You managed to pin him down? He's a pretty tricky man, isn't he?
That's right.
Where did you get hold of him?
He was in the hotel.
And you conducted a conversation with him about the quota rates?
That's right. He said he didn't like it, but he had to go along with it.
What language did you conduct this conversation in, Peter?
German.
You spoke to him about the technicalities of the deal in German?
Yes.
So what's the German for 30%?
30%.
30%.
Yes.
And what about that quote you attributed to him? I don't like it, but I'll have to go along with it.
That's what he said.
How did he say it?
I don't like it, but I'll have to go along with it.
In German, how did he say it?
Ich nichten lichten.
Presumably you mean, rufen Sie ein Taxi bitte, sonst verpasse ich meinen Flug.
Yes.
No, you don't, Peter, because that means get me a taxi, I'm late for my plane. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Did you speak to the German finance minister about the new deal this afternoon?
No.
And what was his reaction?
I don't know.
Peter, thank you.
I mean, that goes back to what I was saying about trying to make it authentic. You know, we don't improvise those, but we kind of try and, we wrote the beats of that and then got them, you know, Chris and Patrick to do it conversationally so that it sounded like I wanted it to sound, you know, look as much like a news interview as possible, not two actors and, you know. And again, it was based on, you know, I'm a bad sleeper, and there's a bit, especially when John Humphreys was on the Today programme at 6 o'clock when they can't get any guests in because it's too early, so they get their correspondents on. So I'm joined now by our business affairs correspondent. What exactly did? But you know, Humphreys though's been up since 3, so he's ready for an argument. You know what I mean? So we just start tearing apart their correspondence. Well, when are we going to get some explanation? I don't know, John. I don't know. You know, it's 6 in the morning. Come on. So yeah.
What I find fascinating, return to the day-to-day in Brass Eyes, it is a brilliant and incisive parody of the news at the time, but now in fact seems to be a huge influence on the way that news is presented. Again, your evil prescience that you've used to destroy society. Because you've just, all of those things, you would hope the reaction would be, oh my God, this is what we do, we really need to change the way.
No,
as opposed to, that is the way to do it.
My life has just been a series of failures, really. Nothing has had any effect whatsoever other than to make people try and emulate it, you know, in their real life. And this was 1994, so, I mean, we had CNN then, but we didn't have Fox, really, in all its horrid glory then. So it was the start of the kind of 24-hour news cycle, really. So news was beginning to have that sense of kind of importance, where if you, again, that's what I was saying about, you know, if you sound confident, then people will believe you. I mean, that's fundamentally what the news is, really. It's not people going, I think there might be a war in Ukraine. I don't know. It's like, pressure is building up on Ukraine, possibility of war. You know, that already you think, oh God, where did they get that from? You know, it's a performance. Really.
Now, does it surprise, because it makes me feel that we should just briefly bring up GB News.
Okay.
Because that was meant to be Britain's version of Fox News, and feels very much like, you know, people sitting on stools just doing that. You know, it's.
I don't know. I haven't watched it really. I haven't felt the urge to.
I've done about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And that was.
It must get some viewers. It must, because it's still going, so it must get some kind of.
Oh, so you've not seen, because that's interesting,
No.
because it's an interesting failure, I think, in terms of going. All of the kind of the look of the day-to-day or brass eye, or then actually Fox News. It's everything is so shiny. And this is such an uncertain channel, including whether the chair will remain solid for the entirety of the hour of the show, or whatever it might be. And I just kind of find that, I just wonder, as you've not watched it, we'll move on. What's your opinion on GB News? That you could have one, though, even though you've not seen it. That's the way the modern world works.
I could just express an opinion confidently, couldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about GB News?
I think it's indicative of the fragmentation of information, in that we now have a particular satellite station that's devoted to a particular slant in which news is projected.
A transcript of this will be given to the Bristol Evening Post later on today. But I mean, the day-to-day was also the excitement of that. You know, there are certain. I don't know.
But all it was fundamentally a sketch show, but we're trying not to look like a sketch show. You know, we just all had these. We just liked funny words and funny phrases, and people sounding serious when in fact they're saying stupid things. You know, the Bank of England has lost the pound. You know, and all that sort of. You know. Several of the Queen's eggs held in reserve will now be used as a basis for the next, you know, and finding footage that matched and getting the rhythm of the news. But it was fundamentally, it wasn't, you know, we didn't have a manifesto about how terrible the reporting of information is. It was just us thinking, what's a funny way of hanging jokes together in a kind of slightly new way.
Well, because I think some people would say, you know, have imagined that Chris Morris was, you know, driven by satire, and yet a lot of people are saying he's driven by absurdism. You know, the news is the perfect place to create this framework of the absurdity.
No, he loves funny work. He always comes up with good names. You know, Iggy Pop Barker. Over now to Iggy Pop Barker with the report. You know, so I think it was. And both of us, because we're roughly the same age, and when we met, I'd come down from Scotland, joined Radio Light Entertainment, was put on a training program to become a producer, where you're taught with lots of other news people and magazine editors and so on how to do a kind of factual program. And I thought, well, I don't want to do a factual, I want to do a comedy. So why don't I do like a news program that is bollocks, but using the news reporter who's on the course and the news editor on the course and so on. And then, you know, that became a thing, and it became, you know, the source of a pilot. Chris Morris at the same time was on the radio, on London radio, doing fake news reports. So I just wrote to him and said, do you want to do this show? And we met up. And it turned out we were roughly the same age, and had the same interest in radio comedy. That's what we were interested in. You know, neither one of us has had a a stand-up comedy career or careers as performers. It's more about growing up loving radio comedy and words, I suppose, just ideas and words and playing about with it. Interested in music as well. He's very musical. And I met him at Broadcasting House. And he'd driven in a terrible battered old car and he couldn't park it. So I just got in the car and we literally drove round Broadcasting House for 2 hours. just coming up with on the hour as it was on the radio in the day-to-day. And that seems slightly symbolic that we're kind of circling the BBC for 2 hours. Well, trying to have a conversation about what we should do.
Well, we're going to throw it out to the audience in a moment. So the last clip we'll have a look at is, we've talked a lot about this already, the thick of it.
All right.
And then I think there should be a roving mic or a couple of roving mics around as well. But let's have a look at this, whatever it is.
Whatever the thick of it is.
The thick of it.
Yeah. I remembered that scene when the party that went on the night before the Duke of Edinburgh's Prince Philip's funeral. They bust a swing in the back garden of number 10 Downing Street. Some drunk party goers had got on the children's swing and broke it. So there we go.
Do you have...
Nothing's changed.
Yeah. Did you talked about before about the time where you did actually go to Downing Street?
Oh, yes, when we were doing In the Loop, there's a scene where Malcolm comes out of number 10, walks down Downing Street, and we thought, well, we can at least write and ask if we can film there. And they said yes. And it was partly because Gordon Brown's premise at the time, he was up doing the Labour conference, so it was sort of quiet there. So they let us in, and they hadn't, normally, it was the first time a drama had been allowed to film 10 hours. But because we were, it was Malcolm Tucker, Peter Capaldi had to do the rounds of the enforcers in the back room who all wanted their photo next to Malcolm. They kind of wanted, this doesn't work, they wanted photos of them being shouted at by Malcolm. It doesn't work as a photo. Anyway, there we go.
Let's see, who'd like to ask a question? See, right, we have one just down there. Someone there in a baseball cap.
Hiya.
Hello.
Chris Morris said that he couldn't or wouldn't be allowed to make Brass Eye now. Have you ever felt your creativity constricted by changing ethical views on what's appropriate?
I've never felt restrained, but then I'm kind of always, once we do something, I mean, personally, I kind of feel once I've done a show for 2 or 3 seasons, I kind of want to move on and do something else anyway. As I say, maybe the thick of it isn't necessarily now the former. If I was trying to do something about number 10 now, I don't know. I don't know. But I've never felt, I mean, I've been kind of lucky in that we've managed to do stuff that hasn't been. The only line a BBC lawyer ever had told us to take out of the thick of it, it's the only time a lawyer said, you can't say that, was in the script. Malcolm says, that's inevitable. It's as inevitable as what they'll find in Jimmy Savile's basement after he dies. And the lawyer said, you can't say that. Savile was still alive then. The lawyer said, you can't say that. And we said, but all we're saying is there'll be something in Jimmy Savile's basement. I mean, it could be cement, it could be an old mop. We're not saying what it is. And he said, you can't. So that line had to go.
Wow.
And I do remember trading with the compliance guide at the BBC. They talk. I mean, there's a lot of swearing in the thick of it, and I did get an email back saying, "Am I allowed to swear? Is this a sweary festival? Is it?"
In this beautiful church, of course.
Yeah, in this beautiful church celebrating silent cinema, am I allowed to swear? Shall I give you a kind of a warning in advance? I'm going to say fuck and cut. So, No, there was an episode of The Thick of It where an email goes round, ostensibly from the minister, calling someone a cunt. And the lawyer got back and said, "We noticed there are 3 cunts in this episode. We will allow you 1 cunt." If you can get the fucks down from 33 every 5 minutes to 20 every 5 minutes. So there was a sort of swearing exchange rate going on about
I've got some more questions from the audience. Let's have a... Yes, down the front there.
What would your advice, or not even what would your advice be, what would you say to someone aspiring to a career in politics now, if you were forced into a conversation?
A career in politics?
Yeah.
Oh, God. That's what I would say, yeah. No, go for it. Have a laugh. Maybe write down all the things you believe in, put them in an envelope, and then, just promise yourself in 5 years' time to open the envelope and remind yourself of what you went into it for. And there are a lot, I always say this, there are lots of people in politics who do the right thing and work hard and are conscientious, and, a lot of backbenchers, a lot of civil servants, a lot of, people who work for the parties and so on. They do go into it for the right reason. So it's, as I say, it's not about, I'm not trying to show people being evil. I'm just trying to show how the system does this to people. But the question is, can you change the system? Or will you allow the system to let that do that to you?
There was a doctor friend of mine who, February 2020, as he knew, the way the pandemic was building up, and he's had to deal with a lot of the administration in London hospitals. And he said to me then, he said, "I cannot imagine a worse cabinet in the history of politics than the one that is now going to have to be dealing with this pandemic situation." Yeah. How do you feel about...
Well, I think that's partly, I think yes, and as I said, Boris Johnson's criteria is not, are you any good, but do you agree with me? Mm-hmm. So already you start limiting, the talent pool from which you draw. But the talent pool in itself, I think, has changed over the years in that it used to be people went into politics after having done something else, really, and thought, well, now I want to... But now people go into politics first, straight from their university degrees or their trade union organisation experiences, straight in. Very often go into politics first so that they can then make money afterwards, which is why you then get a lot of people leaving politics once they find out they're never going to be Prime Minister. Rather than staying on thinking, yeah, but I'd be a bloody good foreign secretary, or I know I could do something with education. And no, if it's, oh God, I'm not going to make it, I'll get out. And I think that's transformed the kind of the talent level within the House of Commons as well.
Do you think also the fact that the definition now of the people who need to have worked in the real world, and that normally seems to be the financial sector, in particular the real world of hedge fund management.
Yeah.
And
the cold face. Yeah. It's the cold face of finance. Yeah. Yeah. Not like what we're doing, which is some of the most dangerous work.
You wait till you find out how that slapstick chair goes right at the end of the show. Let's have some more. You've got one right in the middle over there. Have we got anyone up top as well? I just want to make sure if anyone's... Well, no, that's good.
Do you ever... you were saying earlier about sort of politicians sort of becoming parodies of themselves, like the over-the-top sort of Trump and Boris and Priti Patel. Do you ever watch the news and then they open their mouth and you think, I'm not going to bother because they're beating me to it?
Frequently, yes. Yes. It's not that... I mean, I've never really seen myself as a permanent kind of political satirist, as it were. As well as the thick of it and in the loop, there's Alan Partridge and there's the day-to-day and stuff like that. So I've just seen myself as someone who does funny stuff. So I don't feel that I'm on all the time in terms of, when a news event happens, that I have to have some kind of take on it, really. And for that reason, I'm relieved, because at the moment it would just be very hard work, I imagine.
Well, you said before we came out this afternoon, you mentioned the fact that you used to, till very recently, read all, especially like the kind of North American newspapers.
Yes.
And you have reached a point now
I
where
just can't
you've
now,
become
because
detached
I
from
find
them.
it so disturbing what's about to happen, really, that it's so not funny. Not just the possibility that Trump will get in, but that the election will be manipulated in such a way that it will become impossible. But the consequence of that then being that climate change becomes less of a priority in the US, and therefore other countries or other governments that take their lead from how Trump has behaved will take their lead from that as well. And you know, the consequences are enormous, really. So I'm not funny in the slightest, really.
Well, there seems to, I don't know if anyone's seen the film, or whether you've seen it, Mike Judge's film Idiocracy.
Yes.
Which, you know...
It's not a documentary, really.
It really does, because it starts off with the President of the United States of America is this ex-wrestler, very much that.
Yes.
And there's a book by Chris Hedges, which again is about 10 years old, where he wrote about the fact that a lot of what we now see on the public stage is actually a stage managed as a wrestling match, as a WCW thing. And he talks about Trump in that. And Trump, of course, did all of those games of using the language, the ridiculous language, beautifully ridiculous at times, of wrestling, but turning that into the political arena.
Absolutely, yeah. And he was a wrestler, actually. At university, he did wrestling. And then he was involved, he did commentary on the WWF or whatever. Not the World Wildlife Fund.
That would be terrible commentary if he did. Shoot it! What? Shoot it!
Beautiful panda, beautiful, lovely, you know, the best panda. They're not rare, they're not there. There's millions of pandas under me, beautiful pandas.
Any other... Yes, right in the middle there. Have we got a mic that can... Just check, have we got anyone over there who's got a question?
Hello.
Right, I'll come over to you.
Sorry, Robin.
Sorry.
Hello.
Hello, Armando.
Sorry, we're chatting among ourselves.
That's fine, you carry on. You said yourself that your satirical life has been something of a failure, at least insofar as affecting change. Do you really believe that satire has any role to play other than entertainment in the media?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's not... I did say, I think you're hiding to nothing if you're trying to change people's political opinions. You know, you should go into politics or political journalism or whatever to do that. But I think it helps... You know, it might help crystallize a feeling that people have about something. You know, it might just give them another, a fresh point of view, a fresh perspective on it.
It seems to me that with the Partygate stuff, that there's a lot of funny videos and internet memes shared, and it makes people feel better in self-congratulatory sense, say whatever.
Yeah, the real...
Backslapping, basically. Yeah. But I don't know that it leads to any difference in thought. People are just kind of happy to say, oh yeah, I noticed that too, and then go about their lives.
Absolutely. And so the real, you know, burden rests on the inquisitors.
That's
really.
My name.
So inquisitors both within politics, you know, the opposition, the committees and so on, and the inquisitors out here, you know, not just the public writing to their MPs, but the media interrogating and investigating what's going on, and not feeling just because it's another week gone by that we should sort of move on. It's about that, really. And the less that happens, I think the more frustrated people become, because they see these things happen and then nothing is done about it, or these things seem enormous and then they go away because nothing has changed. You know, I think that leads to disenchantment and disengagement from politics, which I think in the end is a bad thing, because, you know, a vacuum is always dangerous. And so I think people need to be constantly engaged as much as possible. Not become political activists, but to care about how the country is governed, really.
I know we've got one more question just over there in that corner. There we go, hands up there. Because it does seem to me that satire, one of it is also just that sense of camaraderie at times. You can just feel so alone, and when you sometimes see a comic, you all in the same room and you think, oh God, thank heavens we all feel desolate.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yes, so after making movies such as The Death of Stalin and The Personal History of David Copperfield, Is there any other figure you'd like to make a movie about? Maybe a project you've thought of but haven't really developed yet, or an event you'd like to cover? Because
well, it's, you know, I'm interested in where power resides, and I think power resides now not just in governments, but in social media, you know, in the Apples and Googles and Facebooks of this world. I mean, so much power, actually, you know, data about all of us, billions of us, you know, in their hands. And again, you know, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg wakes up in the morning going, you know, what evil will I do today? He just wakes up going, how could I make my company even more brilliant than it already is by using other people's data to turn that into money? You know, and that for me is scary power, because it doesn't have a place, it doesn't have a face or a name, you know, it doesn't sit in one country, it's this other world, you know, this other world where you don't have to pay tax because you're in another world, so why should you, you know, it's that really. So that intrigues me.
Great, thank you.
So I'm doing a lot of research in that at the moment.
Well, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming down. I think there's another Slapstick
Thank you
event
very
at
much.
about 5:30 with Arthur Smith. Let's hear it from Armando Iannucci.
Thank you.